When Barack Obama calmly revealed the one truth Donald Trump never wanted public, the mood in the room shifted instantly. Cameras zoomed in, the crowd reacted, and Trump's face reportedly tightened just off stage. This wasn't a light jab. It was a precise strike, showing how powerful timing can be. It happened live during a nationally televised town hall. The moderators expected another routine talk about immigration and family values, but Obama turned it into one of the year's most memorable moments. Speaking with calm precision, he noted, "Some of the harshest words we hear about immigrants come from a White House, where the First Lady herself is an immigrant." The crowd erupted before Trump could respond. Gasps, laughter, clapping, even cheers. Then Obama delivered the line that set the moment ablaze. "And marriages, whether in the White House or anywhere else, should be built on respect, trust, and honesty." He didn't need to say names. Everyone understood. In that instant, the focus shifted from politics to Trump's personal life. The timing was brutal, landing just as rumors about tension between him and Melania were spreading, fueled by viral clips of her pulling her hand away. Rumors of separate bedrooms and endless tabloid stories had already painted a picture many Americans couldn't ignore. Obama simply pulled that image into the political spotlight. The crowd reacted instantly. Some laughed nervously. Others clapped like they'd been waiting years for someone to say it. Even the moderators froze, unsure whether to move forward or let the moment breathe. Across the country, people leaned closer to their screens. This wasn't an angry politician or a cheap debate insult. This was a former president, calm and composed, delivering a truth too sharp to dismiss. Behind the curtain, Trump's face reportedly flushed red as he muttered to an aide, "This is disgusting, totally disrespectful." But by then the story was already spreading. What made Obama's words sting wasn't just the jab itself. It was how believable it sounded. Every couple knows what happens when respect fades and trust is questioned. Hearing that in the context of Trump's marriage made it hit even harder. By the time the town hall ended, clips were everywhere. Twitter exploded with hashtags, comedians were sharpening jokes, and news anchors were preparing endless talking points. The phrase about respect, trust, and honesty echoed in living rooms, coffee shops, and office break rooms. Yet beneath the laughter and shock, a heavier feeling lingered, the weight of something long suspected but never spoken aloud. Obama had turned a simple policy question into a cultural flashpoint, blending politics, marriage, and morality in the one sharp line. Trump's supporters called it a low blow. His critics called it overdue honesty. Either way, it felt personal, and the nation couldn't stop talking about it. The town hall itself, held in a packed Phoenix Convention Center filled with students, families, retirees, and local business owners, suddenly became the backdrop for one of the most unforgettable moments of the year. The setup was simple. Ask questions, let politicians respond, and give viewers at home the feeling of direct democracy. On paper, nothing about the night seemed unusual, until one question collided with perfect timing. A well-known network anchor leaned forward with a confident grin and asked, "Mr. President, how do you reconcile the administration's tough talk on immigrants with the idea of protecting family values? Do those two things fit together?" The pause that followed said it all. Obama adjusted his mic, eyes scanning the room. He didn't rush. He knew the power of silence, how it made people lean in, waiting. At the back, producers signaled the cameras to stay locked on his face. This wasn't just an answer. This was about to become news. When he finally spoke, his voice stayed calm, which only made the sting sharper. He called out the contradiction. The administration vilified immigrants while the First Lady herself was one. He never said Melania's name. He didn't need to. Everyone instantly made the connection. Then came the line that turned a critique into a direct hit. Marriage isn't about the spotlight. It isn't about appearances. It's about respect, It's about trust. It's about honesty. The room seemed to hold its breath before applause and laughter broke loose. The moderators sat wide-eyed, unsure whether to move on or lean in. For people at home, it was part politics, part reality TV, and completely unforgettable. Backstage, Trump watched on a monitor, jaw tight, fists gripping the chair. "He's going after my family. Can you believe this? My family," he muttered to an aide. For him, it wasn't just about the words. It was the humiliation of hearing them broadcast to millions, and the timing made it worse. For weeks, headlines had speculated about Melania skipping events, while clips of her pulling her hand away from Trump went viral. Late-night jokes piled on. Now, Obama had taken those whispers and placed them squarely into the national conversation, with the whole country listening. The crowd's reactions told the story. A woman in the front row covered her mouth and whispered, "Did he just say that?" A man in the middle stood clapping, nodding along. In the back, college students raised their phones, recording shaky clips that hit Twitter before the broadcast even ended. What began as a town hall had transformed into a cultural moment. Social media poured fuel on the fire. Hashtags like Obama Strikes Back, First Lady Immigrant, and Respect and Trust trended within minutes. Supporters praised Obama's blunt honesty. Critics accused him of going too far, and even neutral viewers admitted they couldn't look away. What made the moment so gripping was its relatability. People weren't only thinking about politics, they were thinking about their own relationships, the cracks that form when respect is gone, and the hypocrisy of leaders who preach one thing but live another. The moderators tried to steady the conversation. Thank you, Mr. President," one said nervously, pivoting to the next topic. But it was pointless. The moment was already sealed, clipped, and spreading across every platform before the event even wrapped. Organizers knew instantly. They weren't walking away with a discussion about immigration policy. They were walking away with a headline that would dominate for days. What really made it explode, though, wasn't just Obama's words. It was Trump's reaction once the cameras turned off. The sharpest blows aren't the loudest. They're the ones delivered calmly, with a steady tone that cuts deeper than shouting ever could. That's how Obama spoke that night in Phoenix. His rhythm was deliberate. Pause, let the silence build, then land the line like a quiet hammer. When he mentioned the immigrant First Lady, there was no smirk, no glance for approval. He simply said it and let the words hang, daring the audience to connect the dots they already knew. Then Obama shifted gears, almost like giving a lesson, adding the words respect, trust, honesty when talking about marriage. That line carried more weight than anyone expected because it didn't sound like politics. It sounded like real life. It was the kind of advice a father might give his son before a wedding, or what a pastor might share in premarital counseling. That's why the crowd reacted so strongly. It didn't feel like an attack. It felt like truth disguised as guidance, broadcast live on national TV. The camera stayed on Obama's face, calm, steady, not smiling, not gloating. If anything, he looked concerned, as if he truly believed the country deserved better than the non-stop drama coming out of the White House. This moment wasn't just about Trump. It was about what America had come to accept as normal. In the audience, a high school teacher, Gloria Ramirez, later told reporters she felt a chill when Obama spoke. He wasn't just talking about them, she said. He was talking about all of us, about what we should expect from our leaders, and maybe even from ourselves. Her words ran on CNN the next morning, amplifying the emotional impact. Inside Trump's camp, though, the mood was explosive. Advisors were livid. One whispered, "We'll call it a cheap shot, sir. We'll frame it that way." Trump snapped back. He's finished. He's jealous. But the problem was, the remark wasn't easy to dismiss. If Obama had yelled, Trump could have brushed it off as unhinged. But the calm, almost professor-like delivery made it sting worse. It didn't sound like an insult. It sounded like a diagnosis, and diagnoses are harder to fight. That's why the clip spread so fast. People weren't just sharing it for the punchline. They were replaying it because of how Obama said it, like an observation too obvious to ignore. Facebook captions read, "He's not wrong," or "Finally, someone said it." By late that night, CNN and MSNBC were running the clip on repeat, while Fox News blasted it as disrespectful to the First Lady. But no matter the spin, the repetition made the moment bigger than the town hall. It became the story of the week. On one panel, a Republican strategist admitted, "Look, I don't like the guy, but I'll say this. He hit where it hurts, and you can tell by how angry Trump looks." A Democratic analyst shot back, "Obama didn't have to scream. He didn't even have to name her. That's the difference. He just told the truth and let people connect the dots." As the clip spread, Melania's name began trending on its own. Reporters scrambled to see if she would issue a statement or appear publicly with Trump in the days ahead. Her silence only fueled speculation. The next morning, the Arizona Republic ran the headline, "Obama's one-liner on marriage shakes White House." An editorial beneath it drew a sharp contrast. One man knows the power of choosing his words. The other still hasn't learned to control his temper. Stephen Colbert went further, holding up a fake marriage manual titled Respect, Trust, and Honesty. 3 words you'll never hear in the White House. On social media, the moment became wildfire. Hashtags like Respect, Trust, Honesty triggered Trump, and Yakro Obama mic drop trended at the same time. TikTok users stitched Obama's calm line with footage of Trump shouting at rallies, captioning it, "Different worlds, same stage." A single clip uploaded by a college student in Phoenix topped 6 million views in less than a day. It wasn't just late-night comedy fueling the frenzy. It was serious analysis, too. Op-eds poured into major papers. The Washington Post ran with the headline, "Obama strikes at hypocrisy, and Trump crumbles." Over at the Wall Street Journal, a columnist called Obama's remark dirty for pulling Melania into politics. But even he admitted the precision left Trump cornered. Podcasts devoted entire episodes to the exchange. One analyst compared Obama's timing to a boxer landing a counterpunch just as the opponent stumbles. Another noted how the contrast, Obama's calm versus Trump's rage, reminded voters why so many still long for his steadier style of leadership. What pushed the story beyond politics was how it spilled into everyday life. Clips weren't just spreading among political junkies. They showed up in Facebook mom groups in Ohio, veterans forums in Texas, even knitting circles in Minnesota. Everyone had an opinion because, at its core, the remark wasn't about policy. It was about marriage, respect, trust, honesty, things people everywhere could relate to. In Phoenix, local stations interviewed audience members leaving the venue. One man laughed, "You could see it in the crowd. Obama had the room in his pocket." A woman added, "I don't care about politics, but respect, trust, honesty, that's marriage 101. If Trump feels attacked by that, maybe he should look in the mirror." The White House tried pushing back. A spokesperson hit the morning shows, calling Obama's words a disgraceful low blow. But the more they complained, the more producers played the clip behind them, undercutting the outrage. Meanwhile, Melania's silence only made things worse. Each day she stayed quiet. Speculation grew louder. Talk shows replayed clips of her swatting Trump's hand away or looking distant at events. A tabloid splashed the headline, "Silent Melania. No defense for Donald." Whether fair or not, her silence made it seem like Obama had touched a nerve. By week's end, the frenzy hadn't slowed. Saturday Night Live opened with a skit reenacting the town hall. Obama sipping tea calmly while Trump's character shouted about fake respect. The audience roared, and the sketch racked up millions of views online. Analysts warned the moment was no longer just entertainment. It carried real consequences. Every minute spent replaying Obama's words. Every minute spent replaying Obama's words was a minute not spent on Trump's policies or his agenda. The narrative had shifted, and Trump was no longer in control of it. For a man who thrived on dominating headlines, losing that control cut the deepest. This time, he wasn't the author of the story. Obama was. And the media had already crowned him the winner of a fight he wasn't even supposed to be in. But, while the media turned the moment into a spectacle, the real drama was unfolding inside the White House. Behind closed doors, anger, paranoia, and silence collided in ways the public didn't see. Hours after the Phoenix town hall, Trump flew back to Washington fuming. Reporters on the plane noted he spent most of the flight holed up in his private cabin, pacing, barking at aides, and replaying clips of the exchange on his iPad. Every few minutes, they heard him mutter the same word: pathetic. By the next morning, the West Wing was tense. Staffers who normally cracked jokes in the hallways kept their heads down. Everyone knew the president's mood was explosive, and one wrong move could set him off. A senior aide whispered, "We're in for a long week." The first meeting was chaos. Trump stormed into the Roosevelt room carrying a folder stuffed with clippings. He slammed it on the table. "Look at this. Every paper, every channel. It's all Obama, Obama, Obama. They're laughing at me. They're laughing at Melania." He jabbed a finger at his communications team. "Fix it. I don't care how. Fix it now." One advisor carefully suggested, shifting focus back to policy. "Sir, if we highlight the new immigration bill, maybe we can..." Trump cut him off. "No one cares about policy. They care about that line: respect, trust, honesty. Like he knows anything about my marriage. It's disgusting." The room fell silent. Another aide tried a different approach. "We could lean into Melania's story. Show her as a strong immigrant who worked hard to become a citizen. Remind people of her journey." Trump shook his head immediately. "So we make her the story? You want people asking questions about her again? That's worse." In the corner, Chief of Staff Mark Reynolds rubbed his temples. He'd seen this before. The president fixating on a slight, forcing staff to chase narratives they could never control. Later, he confided to a colleague, "It's not Obama's words, it's that everyone laughed. That's what he can't forgive." And then there was Melania. Her silence weighed heavier each day. She skipped a planned visit to a children's hospital, citing scheduling conflicts. At a White House reception, she slipped out early to avoid the cameras. Her absence only added fuel to the fire. Inside the residence, staffers said Melania kept to herself. One aide recalled spotting her in the garden, sunglasses on, headphones in, quietly reading. She wasn't angry, the aide remembered. She was distant, like she didn't want any part of it. Trump noticed her silence, and he took it personally. At dinner one night, according to someone briefed on the exchange, he asked, "Why? Don't you say something? Defend me. They're attacking you too." Melania reportedly set her fork down, replied, "I don't want to get involved," and left the table. 4 words, and nothing more. In the West Wing, staffers argued over what her silence meant. Some thought it gave Obama's words even more power, as if she were quietly agreeing. Others insisted that speaking out would only add fuel to the fire. "If she says anything, it becomes another headline," one aide told the press secretary. Sometimes silence is safer, but silence was not what Trump wanted. He thrived on counterpunching, on dominating the cycle. Watching Melania stay quiet while Obama's remarks echoed across the country felt to him like betrayal. Meanwhile, leaks poured out of the White House. Politico and The Washington Post published anonymous quotes describing Trump's late-night rants and his fixation on Obama. One insider said, "He's obsessed. Every morning meeting starts with that clip. He makes us watch it again and again." The obsession wore on his advisors. One evening, during a heated Oval Office discussion, Chief of Staff Mark Reynolds finally snapped, "Mr. President, the more we talk about it, the bigger it gets. If you want it to go away, we have to stop feeding it." Trump glared. "So you're telling me to let him win? You think that's what I should do? Just let him humiliate me?" Reynolds didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everyone in the room knew Trump would never ignore an insult. So while the outside world laughed at memes and replayed clips, the inside of the White House descended into frustration and paranoia. Staff morale collapsed, meetings turned tense, and every policy effort was drowned out by one question: Melania. Marriage. Respect. For a presidency built on controlling the narrative, it was a nightmare. Outside the White House, ordinary Americans were having their own debates. While staff scrambled to put out the fire, the rest of the country was already talking. The discussion wasn't limited to Washington. It spilled into diners in Arizona, coffee shops in Ohio, and hardware stores in Wisconsin. Everywhere, people had an opinion on what Obama had said and how Trump had responded. At a breakfast spot outside Tucson, regulars crowded around a corner booth, plates of pancakes between them. Harold Green, a retired veteran, shook his head as the clip replayed on TV. "You don't bring a man's wife into it," he said, sipping his coffee. Across from him, Linda Foster, a retired teacher, leaned forward. "Come on, Harold." He wasn't attacking Melania. He was pointing out the hypocrisy. Big difference. Their debate drew in two college students at the next table. One laughed. "Obama didn't even say her name. Trump made it about her." In Youngstown, Ohio, a Union Hall meeting that usually centered on contracts turned into a heated political exchange. One steelworker said, "I don't like Trump, but Obama went low. Families off limits." Another shot back, "Families, only off limits if you don't make them part of your brand. Trump parades her around when it helps him. You can't have it both ways." Heads nodded, voices rose, and soon it wasn't just about Trump or Obama. It was about what people expect from their leaders. In Tempe, Arizona, an immigration forum shifted into a conversation about the town hall. A young Latina mother stood and said, "When Obama talked about respect and trust in marriage, I thought about my own family. My husband and I came here from Mexico. We worked hard. We raised our kids. Respect is what kept us going." To hear a president's marriage questioned like that, it reminded me they're human too. They have the same problems we do. Online, the arguments were even louder. Facebook threads stretched hundreds of comments deep. In one Pennsylvania parenting group, a woman posted, "Obama should have kept his mouth shut about Melania. It was disrespectful." Within minutes, the replies poured in. Within minutes, replies flooded that Facebook thread. One man wrote, "He didn't disrespect her. He disrespected Trump's hypocrisy. Learn the difference." Another added, "If your marriage is strong, why get so defensive?" That's single. Post racked up over 2,000 comments before moderators locked it. Talk radio poured fuel on the fire. On a conservative station in Dallas, a caller ranted, "Obama's obsessed with Trump. He can't stand that Trump won. That's why he took a shot at Melania." The host agreed, calling it beneath the dignity of a former president. But on a liberal-leaning station in Portland, the host laughed. He didn't insult her at all. He just reminded everyone what a healthy marriage is supposed to look like. Trump outed himself by overreacting. Callers piled on. One said, "My husband and I watched together, and we both said that's exactly what's missing in the White House. Respect." Even churches weighed in. At a Sunday service in Flagstaff, Pastor Raymond Clark wove the moment into his sermon. Respect, trust, honesty. These are the foundations not just of marriage, but of community, of leadership. When those values are missing, whether in your home or in the highest office, everything begins to crumble. parishioners nodded, some whispering, "Amen." Barbershops and salons turned the debate into entertainment. In Milwaukee, a barber replayed the clip on his phone while cutting hair. "Watch this," he said, rewinding Obama's line about marriage. The shop cracked up when Trump's angry response followed. "Man's thin-skinned," one customer laughed. Another pushed back. "Or maybe he's just standing up for his wife." The barber shrugged. "Either way, it's the best TV I've seen all week." As the debate spread, so did the meaning people attached to the moment. For some, it was about hypocrisy, how Trump could rail against immigrants while being married to one. For others, it was about marriage itself, about what respect and trust look like when they're present, or when they're missing. And for many, it became a question of leadership. Who handles pressure with grace, and who cracks under it? By the end of the week, polls confirmed the shift. A university in Arizona asked whether people agreed with Obama's statement about respect, trust, and honesty. 70% said yes. Asked if Trump had overreacted, 55% answered absolutely. The numbers weren't catastrophic for Trump politically, but they confirmed what people already sensed. Obama had struck a chord, and that was the real takeaway. Beyond the laughter, the memes, and the headlines, people were using the moment to talk about values, about relationships, about the kind of example leaders set whether they wanted to or not. Obama's words carried a moral weight that pushed the conversation past politics and into something bigger: hypocrisy, respect, and leadership. At its core, his message wasn't about party lines or policy. It was about something everyone understands: the foundation of respect in a relationship, and how its absence always shows, no matter how carefully you try to hide it. That's why the line landed so hard. It didn't feel like an attack. It felt like a lesson. And whether people liked Obama or not, they couldn't ignore it. Across the country, Americans reflected on the contradiction laid bare. Trump had spent years blasting immigrants, painting them as threats. Yet the woman standing beside him at state dinners and campaign rallies was an immigrant herself. Obama's point cut clean. You can't condemn immigrants one day and celebrate your immigrant wife the next. A Los Angeles Times columnist put it bluntly, "It doesn't work like that, and the American people know it." But what made the moment truly resonate was the second part, the part about marriage. Everyone had seen the clips of Melania pulling her hand away, or the blank expressions during public events. Those images had already planted seeds. Obama's words simply watered them. He reminded people that respect, trust, and honesty aren't luxuries in a marriage. They're the glue. Without them, cracks eventually show. It didn't matter if you were Democrat, Republican, or somewhere in between. People connected with that truth because they had lived it. A factory worker in Toledo put it plainly. "I've been married 30 years. You can't fake respect. You can't buy it. If it ain't there, people notice." His wife, sitting beside him, added, "That's why it hit Trump so hard." Obama was telling the truth, and he knows it. Churches, community groups, even classrooms picked up the theme. In Dallas, a high school civics teacher asked her students to write essays on what respect, trust, and honesty mean in leadership. In a classrooms, students put it plainly. One wrote, "If the president's own marriage doesn't show respect, why should we believe he respects the country?" Another added, "Obama was teaching us more about values than politics. That's why people listened." What made Obama's words hit even harder was the contrast with Trump's reaction. On one side, calm composure, like a professor explaining a lesson. On the other, red-faced anger, accusations, and shouting. That contrast became a mirror. Which image looked more like leadership? Even in conservative circles, cracks appeared. A Christian radio host in Kansas City admitted on air, "I support the president, but Obama was right about one thing. Marriage is built on trust. That's God's design. And if that's missing in the White House, it's fair to point it out. Calls poured in, some agreeing, some furious. But the conversation always circled back to those same values: respect, trust, honesty. For many, the deeper issue wasn't just marriage, it was hypocrisy and leadership. How could a president rail against immigrants while being married to one? How could he preach family values while presenting a marriage that looked fractured? To a growing number of Americans, Obama's comment wasn't a cheap shot. It was a necessary truth. Couples at home turned to each other, talking about their own relationships. Parents reminded their kids why honesty matters, even when it's hard. Community leaders echoed the moment in speeches, saying, "Respect starts at home. If you don't have it there, you won't have it anywhere." And that's where Obama's victory really lay. Not in embarrassing Trump, but in elevating a conversation America needed to have. He used a political stage to remind people of a timeless principle. Without respect, trust, and honesty, no marriage, no friendship, no leadership can last. The irony was that Obama never shouted. He never insulted Melania. He never even named Trump directly. He just spoke a truth everyone could see. And the silence between his words did the rest, because in that silence, Americans filled in the blanks with their own experiences, their own frustrations, their own longing for leaders who lived the values they preached. But no moment lasts forever. As the dust settled, the question became, what impact would this really have? On Trump, on Obama, and on the nation watching so closely? The town hall moment lingered like a bruise, visible, tender, and impossible to ignore. Weeks later, the echo of Obama's words still carried. It wasn't just that he rattled Trump on live television. It was that he shifted the entire conversation away from policy and statistics and placed it squarely on something human. The contradictions we live with, the values we claim, and the truths we can't hide. For Trump, the moment never truly faded. At every rally, at least one reporter asked about Melania, about marriage, about respect. Even when he tried to pivot back to his favorite lines, jobs, borders, trade, those three words trailed him like a shadow. Respect, trust, honesty. His advisors begged him to drop it, but each angry reaction only deepened the sting. For Obama, the moment was a reminder of his unique power. No longer president, yet still a voice millions listened to. He showed that a single line, delivered calmly and precisely, could dominate the news cycle, rattle his successor, and spark conversations across the country. He didn't need an office to wield influence, just the right words at the right time. But maybe the greatest impact wasn't on either man. It was on the people watching. In homes across America, couples revisited their own marriages in late-night conversations. Some laughed at Obama's sharpness, others shook their heads at Trump's fury. But underneath the theater, people were reminded of something deeper. A marriage isn't a stage. A relationship isn't a performance. Respect, trust, and honesty aren't slogans. They're the backbone of any partnership worth keeping. That was the life lesson hidden in the political drama. Power magnifies everything, but the fundamentals of human connection remain the same. Leaders can argue over walls and policies, but when cracks appear in their own homes, it forces everyone to ask, if respect is missing there, can it really exist anywhere else in their leadership? The moral was hard to miss. Hypocrisy always catches up. When leaders preach one thing and live another, people notice. And when someone like Obama, with a steady voice and perfect timing, puts those contradictions into words, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. It didn't feel like politics. It felt like truth. The story of that night in Phoenix wasn't just about a feud between two men. It was about how words, when spoken with honesty, can cut through anger, noise, and denial. It was about how laughter in a crowd can validate what millions have been quietly thinking. And it was about how sometimes the smallest sentence carries the biggest weight. For the millions who watched live or caught the replay on their phones the next morning, the lesson was simple. Whether you're a president or an ordinary person, trying to hold your family together, respect is non-negotiable. Trust can't be faked. Honesty always surfaces, whether you want it to or not. That's why people kept replaying the clip. It wasn't just about Obama scoring a point or Trump losing his temper. It was because the moment held up a mirror. And in that mirror, people saw not only the cracks in the White House, but the cracks in their own lives, their own marriages, their own leadership. That's why it mattered. That's why it lasted. As much as the media turned it into a spectacle, the legacy of that moment was bigger than headlines or ratings. It was a reminder that truth doesn't need volume. Sometimes it only needs a whisper, delivered at the right time, in front of the right crowd, to change the entire conversation. So as the story of Phoenix settles into history, ask yourself, what do respect, trust, and honesty look like in your own life? Are you living the values you expect from others? Or are there contradictions waiting to be called out by someone brave enough to say them out loud? That was the real lesson Obama left behind in those few minutes on stage. It wasn't about humiliating a president or mocking a marriage. It was about holding up a mirror and asking everyone, leaders and citizens alike, to look closer. If this story made you think, if it reminded you how powerful words can be when they carry truth, make sure to subscribe. There are more stories like this, stories that remind us what really matters, stories that pull back the curtain and ask the questions we sometimes avoid. Stick around, because the next conversation might just hold another truth worth hearing.